This is an RNZ podcast.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Your Money with me, Mary Holm. Thanks for taking just a few minutes to listen in while Jessie Mulligan and I talk through some useful ideas about how to make your money work better for you. Just remember though, this is guidance. Final decisions are up to you. Over to Jessie.
Let's talk money now with Mary Holm, who's in studio with me. Hello, nice to see
Jessie.
you.
Thank you.
You be a Simon Garfunkel fan?
Look, I absolutely am. You have had a good music day today. The Box I think, is one of their best songs. But
And do you know that they just put that la 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 in as a placeholder while they tried to think up some lyrics? Not the first time that's happened, and they liked it so much that they kept it.
Yeah, I remember Paul McCartney had some story like that.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it was now. But,
the movement you need is on your shoulder. That was a placeholder lyric in Hey Jude.
That's right.
Yeah.
It was. Yes. Yes.
And there's some whistling in a song as well, which is the same. Dock of the Bay. The whistling wasn't.
Oh, really? Which is another wonderful song.
Anyway, that's just ruined link 3 for me in the future. I could have used.
You could have, and you had two other musical high points for me today. Reb Fountain would be my favourite New Zealand artist.
So good,
she's terrific.
Have you got to see her live yet?
Yeah, a few times. Recently at Frida Margolis, which is just a little venue in Grey Lynn, and she was there with Dave Kahn, who I think was on today. Gosh, he's brilliant too. He just picks up one instrument after another and plays them beautifully, but she's quite magic, I think.
Never spotted you as a gig goer, Mary. I'm surprised I haven't run into you around the traps.
Yeah, well, perhaps I'm in disguise or you're in disguise
Maybe.
or something.
Yeah.
Then the other musical high point that you won't think of is that you mentioned In My Room by the Beach Boys, which is perhaps their best song, one of their best.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And it's quite an early song too, before they got into the Pet Sounds and the album that changed the world. I think in 1963, In My Room, and
yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah, that doco is worth watching, Echo and Laurel Canyon, and that features a duet from Jacob Dylan and Fiona Apple. It's quite a different version of In My Room, but a nice way to enjoy it in a different way.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it, yes.
Okay.
Well,
that's the end of Mary and Jessie's music appreciation session. Now let's talk money.
Now we're getting on to gender differences in the way people handle money. And I heard you promoting before that, of course, these are real stereotypes and there are heaps of people, male and female, who are different from this. But it's partly just kind of interesting way to get into some basic messages about money.
Yeah, and also good, I think, these days to point out that some people don't identify as male or female, and so they're sort of ignored in this analysis. But yes, nonetheless, those caveats notwithstanding, some interesting info from ASB.
Yeah, ASB just came out with some new stuff on this where talking about spending. They said men erode their pay advantage by spending 8% more than women.
That's an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, so they save more. I mean, they earn more, but they tend to spend more, which is interesting because I think the stereotype of someone who can't stop themselves spending is a woman, really, that going to the mall and just spending up large. But some Stanford research a while back said nearly as many men have what they call the compulsive buying disorder.
Wow.
Binge buying and then financial hardship afterwards. They said that's not confined to women, which is interesting. And then ASB also found fewer women live payday to payday, miss payments or fall into unarranged debt. So it sounds like on an everyday basis, ASB found women. And by the way, how ASB did this research, they just looked at the data of their customers, apparently. And they say that, it's all done, they don't identify that Jessie did this and Mary did that.
But pretty robust way of analysing this, eh?
Yeah, indeed. So they looked at bank accounts and they must have the gender information in there and how people have behaved, which, it is more robust than just the usual surveys where people often probably fib a bit. They also found that women were more likely to have savings accounts with $600 or more in them. So women have got more sort of rainy day money sitting there, apparently. But then when you look at retirement savings, they looked at when women were withdrawing from KiwiSaver at retirement, and they found that they had balances 12% lower than men in the same situation. So men and women
We've
taking
talked
money
about
out.
that recently. I think I talked about that with the retirement commissioner, the retirement gap. Yeah.
Yeah. It's yes. Jane Wrightson was talking about that quite a lot recently. That. And you know, I think we all kind of know it, that it's partly because of the gender pay gap, where men earn more than women, partly because they're longer in the workforce and all of that. But when they adjust for all of those things, they still find that men are getting paid more than women.
You mean the balance is different?
The pay. If you compare a man and a woman who have got the same qualifications and the same experience length of time in the workforce and that kind of thing, that the men are still after all these years, getting paid more than women for similar work or the same work sometimes.
Right. So in case someone is trying to explain it away and say, oh yeah, but if women didn't take time off for having babies, then it would be equal. No, they've controlled for that, and still men. There's
still a pay gap in there. Yeah, which is
a couple of the things with the retirement balances. Are things out of women's control, really, but you've noticed something that might be within their control.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, a couple of things that they're putting it down to that are within their control. One is that they take more time out of work, but nonetheless, that's often for very legitimate reasons.
Yeah, quite gendered reasons usually.
Yes, But women tend to go into lower risk funds, which makes a huge difference in long-term savings. It doesn't matter that much over a couple of years, but over 20, 30, 40 years, the women go into the lower risk KiwiSaver funds and the men go into the medium or higher risk ones and end up with, sometimes twice as much money. It's huge.
I wonder if that's part of the personality that also accounts for women being apparently better at money management, whether, you pointed out they're less likely to live payday to payday, to miss payments or fall into unarranged debt. And so maybe when they're choosing their KiwiSaver funds, they're thinking, well, I'll be careful.
Yes. Yeah, look, you're probably right. It's probably... women have got a stronger self-preservation instinct than men. I think you just have to look on the ski slopes at who's skiing around like an idiot. It's usually people of a certain gender and people of a certain age group, actually.
Yeah. We'll do the A&E stats on another day, yeah.
Yes, indeed. On knowledge of finance, women rate their knowledge as far lower, and in fact, their knowledge does tend to be lower than men on financial issues. But some really interesting stuff that I was digging up again, looking at during this session. And this was the CFFC, Commission for Financial Capability survey done last year. And they found in the youngest age group, men and women start with about the same score on financial knowledge. But as they get older, the men get ahead of the women. The women don't seem to keep accumulating more financial knowledge as much as men do. And this I thought was really interesting, women who have children have lower financial knowledge than women without children. And what's more, single women with no children have the highest of all of those groups. And I thought, gosh, this is worrying, actually. It sort of suggests that women with children are perhaps leaving it to their husband or their male partner to run the money while they're, awfully busy often with a heck of a lot of other things. And so, you could say fair enough. The trouble is that it's terribly disempowering for them if they don't really understand the money. And, so many stories about marriages breaking up and the woman just sometimes even knowing where the husband's salted away money or whatever. It's really, I find that really distressing. I think, okay, if you've got little kids and you're busy, okay, it's totally understandable to let something slip, but please don't let your knowledge of the money, the family's money slip. Don't let that be one of them.
That old phrase, knowledge is power, but that's very true with money and relationships.
It sure is. It sure is, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. some other research on the male-female differences too found that women tend to just want to maintain their highest priority with, say, a savings product is to maintain their original money. They don't want their money to go down at all. Whereas men are much more willing to have their money fluctuate up and down as long as they get a higher return. And that comes back to that same business about choosing which KiwiSaver fund to go in and so on. But another...
and a regular listener of our slot will know that that's a misunderstanding, really, isn't it? It's a misunderstanding to think that a low-risk fund is going to be better to keep your money safe.
Yeah, it is really, yes. Because in the long run, you're going to end up with a lot less. If you're prepared to be a bit braver with your money and see your balance sometimes going down, in the long run it will be higher, especially over long periods. It makes a huge difference. So on the other hand, so women are, not brave enough really with their long-term investments in general. Men, on the other hand, trade too often. They trade about 45% more than women, according to one piece of research. And frequent traders, we're talking usually about shares here, tend to do way worse than people who get into the right range of shares or share fund for them and stick with it. There was one piece of research that showed that divided people up into 5 different groups according to how often they traded. And they found that the group that traded least had earned 7 percentage points more than the group that traded most over the long term. So we're looking at, say, one earning an average of 3% and the other earning an average of 10%. It was huge. People who trade often, they think they're making the right moves, but they're very often not. And then there's the costs of trading that come out of it, and tax can come out of it too. And so it's really this frequent trading that men are much more likely to do is not a smart move.
No.
It's often put down to overconfidence, that people think, okay, they've heard me just spouting those figures to them, but they think they're the exception. And there are people who, certainly over short periods do way better.
By definition, there will be exceptional
That's
people.
right. Yeah.
But it won't be down to their skill or knowledge.
No, and usually, the same ones do well. Some do well for a while, and then someone else does well for a while. And it's not a smart thing to do. Looking at scams, which is a whole other area, Australian research on telemarket scams found that 90% of the victims were male, which I found astonishing actually. But that was what they came up with. And then some other UK research differentiated between types of scams. They found that older, wealthier, risk-taking men were the most likely targets for share fraud when worthless or unsellable shares are on offer. They found these men were overconfident. They thought they knew how to pick a winner, and so they were more likely to get ripped off in those sort of scams. Women, on the other hand, were more affected by what they call recovery fraud, which is a really sad one that I think we've talked about before. Yeah. When you lose money in one scam and someone comes along and offers to rescue you from it, and those people are also scammers, and so you get ripped off again. They say, look, just send us $100 and we'll get your $10,000 back for you or whatever. Sorry.
We've got it. Now we just need the $200 exchange fee.
Yes,
if you can.
yeah.
I was being held up at the port, there's just a $500.
Yes, there's all sorts of horrible stories like that, and apparently women are more suckers for that, which is sad to hear. In all of these cases, of course, we just want men and women not to be caught up in any of them. So
Liz in Rakai says, does Mary think that maybe the reason for women being more conservative in their investing is the fear of being left with very little should the relationship end?
Yeah, I'm sure it's something like that. I mean, women, worry about that kind of thing, but a much more powerful way to handle that fear would be to just be on top. There's just some basic money messages. It's not hard. Read my book or listen to you and me talking. It's not like we're talking hard stuff. So I think, sure, it's good for women or anyone to have emergency funds and that kind of thing, but just know what's going on in the money markets with your money. Not in the money markets, actually, just with your own money.
Yeah, know
is
how
much
it works.
more powerful. Yeah.
Some thoughts to sum up then?
Yes, just the basic messages are women can end up being too conservative, take more risk with your long-term money, and just remember that if you're being too conservative, and you're actually taking the risk that inflation will erode your long-term money, whereas if you go into higher risk, if you go into higher risk funds, you're much more likely to end up ahead of inflation. So be braver, women. With men, resist the temptation to be overconfident and take too many risks and trade too often. Diversify. There's a lot of men think they can pick which shares to buy, and they often get it wrong. So, all in all, everybody try and average out a bit more.
Mary, thank you.
Thanks, Jess.
If you've come in late or you'd like to listen to previous chats with Mary Holm, head to our podcasts page at rnz.co.nz. They are all there.